I'm Dr. Berney.
And I'm Dr. Richard.
And it's Friday morning, so it must be time for the mental breakdown.
It is indeed.
We had a great workshop last night.
We did, that was fun.
We talked about, we did a 2-hour workshop last night here in our office on creating motivation. Great conversation, about a dozen people were here. Great conversation, great ideas, and hopefully it will lead to some changes.
That was a stimulating night. We had some teachers from one of the local elementary schools in Polk County, and they were just a joy to be with.
Very engaging.
They were
very engaging. That always makes workshops easier. And you know, that's of course one of the reasons we use Mixlr when we do our podcasts is we're looking for some of that engagement, some of that interaction, some of that discussion, because when we're talking about some of these things, you know, it makes it so much more meaningful to you when you can ask questions and when you can be part of the conversation. So we always, of course, encourage you to listen to us on Mixlr, though we haven't kept to a very steady schedule with our Mixlr podcast recording. It was always set to be at 8 o'clock on Friday mornings, but the last couple of weeks we've struggled with that a little bit. So we'll get back on track, and so that those of you who are interested in listening can listen live and participate with that. So,
Yep, love to have you join us live.
So speaking of getting into bad habits and getting into situations where we need to make some improvements, last week we started a series on talking about making change, setting goals and meeting our goals. And last week we talked about fear. We talked about how the fear of failure, the fear of ridicule, sometimes the fear of success prevents us from being able to accomplish some of the things that we want to accomplish. And I think that was a great discussion that we had there.
Yeah, and this is all part of a larger discussion that happens in January,
right?
Where people make New Year's resolutions, and that's how this whole thing got started. Is
Absolutely.
That we were talking about the changes we want to make for the coming year, and people make these resolutions, and we talked a little bit about why resolutions don't get you very much,
right?
And instead think in terms of goals rather than resolutions.
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about fear last week. We have a few other major obstacles that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks. But today, our focus is on the obstacle of, well, it's almost the obstacle of biology. And that is the challenge of breaking old habits.
Right, how your brain gets in the way of breaking old habits and wanting to start new habits.
Right. And so now we're not going to get, well, we might get a little bit into the neurology of some of this because I think that it's important because, you know, we often, whether it's with ourselves or with our children or with our spouses, we sort of set this expectation for change and we just assume that the change is going to happen. We say, I want to change this about myself, and then we just kind of work from the assumption that, okay, well, I decided that I'm going to make this change, and so the change is going to happen. And it doesn't work that way. And there's biological reasons for why that doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. You know, we have in our brain, we have what we refer to as the stop-go system. And the challenge is that the go system is much more powerful than the stop system. It's much more evolutionarily. It's been around for a lot longer. So it's just been part of the human species, but also just animals in general, for much longer than the stop system.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's really important because when we talk about making changes, we're either talking about stopping a bad habit or building a positive or productive habit.
Right.
Okay. And as it turns out, that's really the way the brain works. Mm-hmm. In our brain, as you said, we have a stop. There's mechanisms that stop us, and there are mechanisms that make us go. And what we're going to talk about here is that we need to start focusing on the go system rather than the stop system. Stop fighting biology. Because most of us fight biology. They say, I'm going to stop smoking. That's hard to do.
Right.
That is very difficult to do. Not just for you because you're weak, but you're fighting. That's what you meant when you said you're fighting biology.
Right.
Because the stop system is very, very difficult to change. The go system, you have a little bit better chance.
And we, to be more specific, we probably should call it the go-stop system, because the go is really what drives everything.
Right.
And if we think about it in terms of structures in our brain, now, if you think about how your brain is organized, if we come up from the spinal cord and we go up and we have the little handle at the top of the spinal cord, that's our most primitive brain, but that's also one of the most important parts of our brain, because that's what keeps our biological systems going.
Right.
Right above that system is sort of our second brain, sometimes referred to as our reptilian brain, and that's the part of our system where all of our emotions, our hedonistic drives, all of our basic drives are sort of derived from there. The drive to eat, the drive to reproduce, the drive to keep warm, the drive to express our anger sometimes. All of that is there in that second brain.
And those are strong drives. Those are life-sustaining and species-producing, reproducing functions.
Right.
So they're very, very strong.
Right.
There's a lot of impetus, there's a lot of inertia behind this.
And what's important, the reason that it's important for us to talk about that is because that is where the go system is.
It's the go system.
The go system is there in one of the most basic parts of our brain.
Right.
And what that means is, just like the medulla, the handle at the top of the spinal cord, that all happens without us really being consciously aware that it's happening. Right. That next layer up, there is some conscious awareness there, but those drives are pretty intrinsic. I mean, it just sort of happens. Right. You don't really need to make a decision to say, I think I'm hungry. You realize that you're hungry, but you're not making a decision to be hungry. And so these things happen on their own. We're not making a decision. So and again, the go system is housed there. And
we might add, too, that within that same cluster of structures that provide us with these drives is also the reward system of the brain.
Right.
It's down there.
Right.
It's down there with all these emotional structures.
Right.
So we have to remember that the go structures, these emotional structures, are also where reward resides.
Right. So let's stay here for just a couple of seconds, a couple minutes, because there's a few things that we need to point out here. Because there's two things that you may be thinking. One is, some of the things that I want to change aren't basic drives. I want to change the way that I eat, and that's not the way that I eat. Eating is a basic drive, but the way that I eat isn't a basic drive. Well, it becomes a basic drive because what happens is we develop habits. And habits are our bodies, our biology likes routine. It seeks and it hungers for routine, for repetition. We look for these patterns. And in fact, we're one of the few animals that looks for and makes decisions based upon repeated patterns. Right. So when we begin a set of behaviors that may start out as a conscious choice, the more that we do those things, the more they become habits, and the more they become unconscious. The more they become, not unconscious, subconscious. Right. Think about those of you who are adults and you're driving, and you've been driving for 20 years. When you're then trying to teach your 15-year-old how to drive, you begin to remember, wow, there's a lot of things that you have to think about when you're driving. Right. Meanwhile, we're driving around town, hardly giving a second thought or any thought at all to turning our blinker on to turn right or left, or getting in the correct lane to make your turn. Knowing how much pressure to put on the gas pedal versus how much pressure to put on the brake pedal when you need to stop and go. They just become automatic, and we don't give much thought to them because they become so habitual that in many ways taken over by some of these subconscious areas of our brain. So even though some of these are more complex behaviors, some more complex things that we want to change, they do become underlying behaviors that are driven by those underlying systems in our brain. And if you need proof of that, if you drive an automatic, or preferably if you drive a stick shift, and you drive a stick shift every day, get in a car and try to drive an automatic. And see how long it takes before you put your left foot through the floorboard trying to find the clutch. Right. Because it's an automatic behavior. It just begins to... Or one time what happened to me is we had the gear shifter. I pulled it all the way down into, or I actually tried to push it up into park because I was trying to shift gears, but I was in an automatic, and I pushed that up, and my car didn't like that too much when I did that.
Especially if it's moving at the time.
Right. But those behaviors become automatic when we do them repeatedly.
That's right, because what we're talking about is, and we use this phrase often, we talked about it last night in the workshop, the brain gets good at what it does repeatedly.
Right.
And that's what habits are. They're the brain doing something over and over and over and over again, and it just gets very good at doing that, and it does it automatically.
Right.
Okay? And that's what we're talking about here. So when we talk about biology, we're talking about habits, and we get very good at certain things because we do them over and over and over again. Brushing our teeth, making coffee in the morning, all those things become automatic. And so we have to remember that once we've laid down these brain pathways, we're driven to do them, but then we lay down these brain pathways, and then the brain gets very good at doing those things over and over again. That's why we tend to be very ritualistic. Most of us do things in a similar way every day.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And this sort of leads to the other reason why this underlying system is so driven, and you touched on it a moment ago, and that is a lot of the pleasure centers are housed around there as well. Right. And so many times even though we engage in behaviors that are not really healthy for us, once they become habitual, our brain finds pleasure in that routine.
It does what is pleasurable.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about eating badly, we think about eating sugars. Even though sugar is not really good for us, our body really likes it. Right. And so it stimulates those reward centers in our brain. Again, that underlying go stuff. Mm-hmm. It stimulates that. It makes us want to do that more, and it makes the habit even stronger.
Right, and that's what you have to remember, is that you have established these patterns, these habits, and that's where your brain is going to keep going. For some reason, your brain finds whatever you're doing very rewarding, right, very appealing. And that's why it's so hard to stop it, because your brain has suddenly become very, very good at whatever you're doing. So keep that in mind when you decide that you're going to change something, because you have these brain pathways that you're actually going to be changing. And that's not easy to do.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that leads us to the next, we'll kind of jump to the next part. So we understand that we have this, we'll call it the second brain. We have the basic brain that keeps our body functioning. Right. We have the second brain that controls all these underlying drives and motivations and things. And then we have our third brain. And the third brain is really what makes us human. And that is our cortex.
Right.
That's the wrinkly part of our brain, the part that you see when you that you really think about when you see a brain, and that part of our brain is the most advanced, but it's also the most also the newest, and maybe the weakest. And the weakest.
It really is, because when you the word cortex actually means bark. So this wrinkled part of your brain is actually it's like the bark of a tree. It's just the top layer, and in fact, it's only 3 millimeters deep, which is about the diameter of a pencil eraser. It's really thin. Lots of neurons in there.
very
that's
dense.
What gray matter is. But and it's also the latest to evolve, the last to evolve. And when you say it makes us human, that's the part of the brain that does information processing.
Right.
It learns, it speaks, it hears, it reads. So it does all those school tasks. But it also, and I'm sure you're going to move in this direction, it also provides the inhibition to slow down the go system.
Right.
So in a sense, the cortex is the stop system, and the emotional structures, the limbic system, the second brain, is the go system.
Right.
And we're asking our cortex to stop the emotions, to inhibit the emotions.
Right, and not just the cortex in general, but just specific regions of our cortex. And it's almost as though biology works against us in these areas, because the go system, again, is, I mean, really, it's there when you're born. I mean, many of these drives begin when you're born. They're there.
We call that precocial.
Right.
The go system, the structures that we're talking about, those emotional structures, are precocial. A little child is capable of sensing fear and expressing anger.
Right.
Okay. They can't inhibit it very well, but they sure can express it. So remember that the emotional structures develop early, develop well, and so we call them precocial.
Right. And the area of our cortex, the specific, so the cortex covers our entire brain for the most part, around the sides, the top, the front, and the back. Not so much underneath, but there's some folds in there. But we can't draw a picture right now. But what the specific area that protects us from, or that creates the stop system, is the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
And the prefrontal cortex, if you imagine from about the most forward part of your ears, right around your temples, from there forward, that's about the area called your prefrontal cortex. That, you may have seen this in different reports and different documentaries and things like that. That is the last region of your brain to develop.
Right.
And that's not even, and it's not fully developed until mid-20s, sometimes even later than that if there's things like ADHD or other abuse and things like that that's going on. That it could be even later than that. So the area of your brain that's really committed to the stop system, the stop part of our system, is the last to develop, the weakest, and usually doesn't have as much energy as the go system.
That's right. And we call that altricial. So the emotional parts of the brain are precocial. They develop early and fast. And the inhibitory parts of the brain, this prefrontal cortex, is called altricial because it develops slowly.
Right.
Okay, that's what the word altricial means. So we have a precocial emotional system, a go system, and we have an altricial inhibitory or stop system.
Right.
And so those things are working against each other. Guess who's going to win most of the time?
Right.
And in teenagers, imagine a teenager producing all this emotional energy, but has very little inhibition. Mm-hmm. And you wonder why teenagers act the way they do. Or children with ADHD who have very little inhibition because they have a prefrontal cortex that's not working very well.
Right. Even for their
less
age.
Less well than same-aged peers. And yet that go system is going. It's always cranking. And so they just don't have a lot of inhibition.
It doesn't
so the
slow
go
down.
system typically wins.
Right. And so that was a little bit of a biological background to arrive at the point that when we're thinking about change, when we're thinking about adjusting habits or stopping, the title of this podcast, stopping old habits, what we're really talking about is we're going to battle against our biology.
Right.
Because that underlying go system, that can chug along 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no effort needed. It just happens.
And it's always seeking reward.
Always.
It's always out there looking for reward.
The stop system, on the other hand, has a finite amount of fuel.
Right.
When you think about how hard you work all day, to make good decisions, to not say the things to your boss that you would like to say, to not say the things to your teacher that you would like to say, to maybe not do some of the things you would like to do, that you're driven to do. You expel a lot of energy all day long to do that. And then you get home, and that's where we tend to let loose a little bit. We meet a lot of parents who talk about their kids. They have absolutely no problems at school during the day, but at night they're a nightmare. Well, what's typically happening there is the kid is putting forth a tremendous amount of effort throughout the school day to contain those behaviors, to contain those impulses, and then when they get home, they just don't have the energy left to inhibit those impulses.
I never thought of it that way before, but actually this limbic system, the emotional structures, they sort of function automatically and effortlessly, whereas the inhibitory structures, the cortex, takes considerable effort to make it work. So one takes effort and one is effortless.
Right.
So that's another thing that you're always battling.
Right, right. So
because you use up the effort. It's a finite amount of like you say, fuel or energy, and it's like a gasoline tank in your car. Eventually you get to empty.
Right, right. Yeah,
and you have less inhibition.
When we worked in the hospitals, when the sun went down, you never wanted to work the 3 to 11 shift, because when the sun goes down, that is when things are tough. Right. Not because literally the sun goes down, but because by that time of the day, the energy that we have in that prefrontal cortex to contain all those impulses and manage all those behaviors has worn down, and there's just not as much energy left. So when we're talking about breaking old habits, changing old routines, we really are talking about battling against our biology, because our go system wants us to keep doing what we're doing. It finds pleasure in that. It's happy there, even if it's completely unhealthy for us, even if it's harmful to us. Our body wants to do what it is accustomed to doing. And so when we talk about change, we're really talking about a battle of biology. And so we have to adjust that perspective. We have to overcome that obstacle, we have to do something else. And because willpower alone will not sustain us. But you don't have the willpower necessary to sustain any decision to make a change.
Yeah, I think that's myth number one. But you just have to have the willpower to do it.
Right.
You have to have the will to do it.
Right.
And people say, "Well, just stop doing it." Well, just stop doing that. That's not how it works.
Right.
You need more than willpower.
It's good to begin that way, but there's something else that has to happen.
Right.
Because the desire has to be there. One of the things I always talk with my patients about, they talk about wanting to do this and wanting to be that and wanting to. My first question always is, really? Are you sure?
Are you sure? That's right.
Is that really what you want to do? Because if that's what you want, this is what has to happen.
Right.
This is what we're going to have to do. And I'm not doing that to dissuade them from any of the decisions that they're trying to make. But what I'm trying to help them understand is, if you're going to commit to something, it is just that. It is a commitment. And you can't just rely on willpower. You can't just rely on how you feel right now to say, well, I'm so motivated to do it right now that it's going to sustain me for the next 11 months. Because that's not going to happen. Nobody has that kind of willpower. That much. I don't even want to refer to it just as willpower. That much energy. That much.
Yeah, you don't.
Neurological energy.
The cortex just doesn't have that energy. Doesn't have that. The tank is not that large.
Right.
To do that.
So there's a couple of strategies that we can use, and there is a great deal of overlap. But there's several strategies that we use to help people break old habits.
Right.
All of them require work. Sorry to say. They all require work. They all require effort. They all require daily decision making. Right. Because if you want to, I used this example last night in the workshop. If you want to get healthier and start working out, don't reward yourself then with a hot fudge sundae for after going to the gym. That's counterintuitive, and your body's not stupid. It knows what's going on. It knows, and it's, you're feeding your body in an unhealthy way, despite the fact that your goal is to be healthier. So you have to make sure that you're doing everything in line with what your goal is. And extrinsic motivation, it works at times, but we can't just rely on that to get where we need to be. So let's talk about the first strategy. How do we make a change in an old habit? And the first way is to make it conscious. We have to acknowledge what it is.
Right.
We have to say, this is what it is, this is what it's not, examples and non-examples. So if we're thinking about, I want to be healthy, okay, we need to define what healthy is. Healthy to me may be different than healthy to you. So we need to define it pretty clearly. Once we make it conscious, then we have to, many times it's good to put it in writing, to clarify it, get it down on a piece of paper, so that we can see it and we can analyze it and we can then set long and short-term goals.
Yeah, the first thing you have to do is, as you say, that you have to bring this to consciousness. I mean, you have to focus on it. One of the experts in this field, in fact, says, don't do anything for a month. Just think about what you want to change, give it time, let it incubate, and take a month just to figure out what you want to change, why you want to change it, what role is it playing in your life. Just spend time thinking about it and write it down. And the reason they advise us to do this is because you have to really understand what you're what you want to work on.
Absolutely.
The other thing is you have to start, when you write it down, you also want to start measuring it. And the reason you want to measure it is because there's something called the observer effect. And sometimes just measuring something changes it.
Right.
Okay. If you're not willing to write it down, you're probably not ready to start the change process. We have something in our office called the elimination diet.
Right.
Berney has done it. We published a book on it. And I intend to do the diet, the elimination diet. However, I haven't been able to write anything down yet. Okay?
Right.
That tells me I'm really not ready to do it.
Right.
So one thing that will happen is if you're not ready to take your time and write it down and be very methodical, you probably shouldn't try to start the change process. Do that first. Write it down because you're going to need to specify things. And the reason is because you are going to encounter failure.
Right.
You have to measure your success, but you're going to encounter failure. And so you have to have a very good plan. What the diet book does is it gives you a very good plan to follow.
It's very concrete.
Very concrete. You do this for this many days, you do this for this many days, you do this for this many days, and it really structures it for you. So if you're not ready to write it down, if you're not ready to organize your thinking, you're not ready to start the change process.
Well, and I think that yours is a great point because what that does is that makes you be more thoughtful about it.
It has to be thoughtful.
How many times do we talk to somebody on December 31st and they're sitting there thinking, oh, let me think of my New Year's resolutions, and they try to come up with it on the spur of the moment and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the new year. Well, you are very unlikely to succeed if that's the way that you're going to approach trying to change old habits. You have to be thoughtful about it. You have to, and again, like I said before, is it what you really want? Because if it's what you really want, then you're going to be able to write it down. You're going to be able to say, this is what I'm talking about. And this is how I'm defining it and how I'm measuring it and how I'm going to document it.
Because otherwise it stays at the level of, I'd really like to be able to run. I really wish I could exercise. I really would like to go to the gym. I really would like to be. Those are all things that we'd like to do. They're not goals.
Right.
Okay? And they're not goals because we're not doing the things that goals require, that real change requires.
Right. So when we clearly define it, when we clearly articulate it and articulate it on paper so we can see it, so that we can tease it apart as much as we need to. And one of the things we talked about last night is you have a long-term goal. Every long-term goal is comprised of short-term goals.
That's right.
And so as you say, this is the habit, or this is the situation I want to modify.
Right.
Here's how I'm going to do it. And you can create a step-by-step guide to where you have almost daily short-term goals.
And that's all the stuff that needs to be written down, because if you don't plan this thing out and make a map for yourself, you're not going to stay on track. You're not going to stay on schedule.
Right.
So you have to write this stuff down. I'm sorry, you have to write this stuff down. And the older the habit, the more determined, the more you have to write down, because the older habits are going to be harder to get rid of.
Right.
And the more important something is, the harder it is to get rid of. Okay?
Exactly.
Much harder to get rid of a nicotine habit than it is to get rid of a deep sea fishing habit, because you smoke cigarettes more than you go deep sea fishing. So,
right.
So those things that really concern you are by nature going to be harder to change.
Though I would like a deep sea fishing habit.
That
would be great. So, but what you're saying is important, because again, we talked about this last night, and you mentioned it a minute ago. Okay, so the brain is comfortable, is good at what it does repeatedly. Right. Well, in medicine, in all branches of health, what we know is the most difficult things to treat are chronic conditions that have been present for a long time. That's right. And so when we're talking about habits that have been present since you were a teenager, some that you've been present since you were a kid,
right. That's right.
Those are going to be incredibly difficult to stop.
Because you're doing them because they're providing you something.
Something.
I mean, you wouldn't be doing it if it didn't provide you with something. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the longer you've done it, the harder it's going to be to get rid of.
Right.
Okay. And you're right. You're probably been doing it since childhood.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When we think about eating habits, when we think about exercise or maybe lack thereof, again, those are patterns that we tend to get stuck in that are long lasting. So when they're chronic, that's when they're going to be more difficult. And again, the first recommendation, the first idea, strategy is making it conscious, writing it down, articulating it, and putting it in a way that you can look at it and know, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. This is how I'm going to do it.
Right.
So articulating it that way.
That's right. And that's that resolution versus goals thing that we talked about.
Exactly.
A resolution is, I really resolve to go to the gym or to begin exercising. 2016 is the year that I'm going to start exercising. That doesn't buy you anything. That's aspirational. Okay?
Right.
That's what I'd like for that to happen. I'd like to win the Powerball. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what I'd like to have happen. You got to turn that into a goal.
Right.
When you turn it into a goal, you got to start writing things down. You got to keep a schedule.
And here's how you'll know. Here's another way that you'll know if this is going to be something meaningful to you. If you do it because you want to do it,
right.
Not because it's New Year's. Right. It confuses me when people say, even if they're planning, even if they're saying this is what I'm going to do, but they're going to make these huge, important life decisions, and they say, "Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start. I'm going to start in January." Well, there's a lot of time between now and January where you could be making positive changes. You could be moving in that direction. In a healthy way. Right. I want to, if you're overweight and you want to start exercising because your blood pressure is high and your blood work is out of whack, and then you say, well, I'm going to start doing everything that my doctor is recommending, but I'm going to wait 2 months to do that. Right. Why? Mm-hmm. Why are we waiting? And what that means, or what that suggests to me, like you were saying earlier, is you're not really ready for the change. Mm-hmm. You're not really committed to it.
You're not there. It's like when people want to quit smoking. Every smoker, or most smokers, want to quit smoking.
Right.
But nicotine is so rewarding that it's very difficult to stop. I had an uncle who worked for a tobacco company. He was a salesman for a tobacco company, and he smoked. He smoked all of his life. As soon as he had his first heart attack and his doctor said, if you keep smoking, you're going to die, he quit immediately. He had tried for years to quit smoking, wasn't able to. But as soon as he was told, if you don't quit smoking, you're going to die, he quit immediately. Never smoked another cigarette, okay? Because that became important enough for him to stop. It was his. Then it was his. He had ownership. He had control.
Right. And when... And I guess that's a great example to maybe clarify. When it's something that meaningful, boom, we can stop like that.
That's when you know.
When it's something that crucial. And maybe, another strategy is trying to figure out how to make it that important to you.
That's right. Why isn't it? If you're not doing it, it's not yet important enough.
Right.
If you're not writing it down, if you're not really ready to commit, it's really not as important as you think it is.
Right. Yeah. I think back to patients and people that I've talked to who have stopped things cold turkey.
Right.
And when you say, well, why, how did you do that?
Right.
It's, I wanted to make sure that, I'm alive to see my grandchildren.
Right.
My doctor told me this or that, and I want to make sure that I'm healthy so that I can spend time with my grandchildren.
Reducing a dress size or a waist size may not be enough.
Right.
I have a 42-inch waist and I want to have a 38-inch waist. Yeah, you'd like to, but it's really not important enough. But if somebody says, you're going to have diabetes and suffer the consequences of diabetes, and it may make it important enough for you to take the action to set a real goal.
Right.
And then that's going to get you off the sofa and to the running track.
And again, there are people who that's not important to.
Still not important.
When you go to the doctor and they say you're pre-diabetic, you got to change the way that you're eating, or else you're going to have you're going to develop full diabetes. If you don't change, if it's not that important to you, if that diet that you're eating is that important to you, you're not going. That's not going to matter.
We do things for a reason.
I'll give myself an insulin shot once a day. That'll be fine.
I'll take insulin and keep eating dessert.
Right. So it has to be meaningful to you, and I think that we underestimate that sometimes, the importance of it being
because
important.
It's so hard to change your brain. It's so hard to change these habits that it really has to be important to you.
Right.
And that's why you have to raise this. If you're going to change, raise it to the level of consciousness.
Right.
You're going to have to be mindful. It's going to take a lot of work.
Right. Right. So another strategy is to consider. We're talking about behaviors. When we talk about habits, we're talking about things that we are intentionally doing, or subconsciously perhaps, but we are intentionally doing.
That's right.
And many times we try to modify that behavior by using consequences. We say, well, if I go to the gym, then I will go by and get me a smoothie afterwards. I changed smoothie to smoothie. I was going to say milkshake, but that just makes my brain want to explode. So if I go to the gym, I'm going to go by and get me a smoothie. That's great, but what if something happens at work today and you have a smoothie for lunch?
Right.
Are you really going to want a smoothie tonight? And so now the motivation to go to the gym really isn't there.
Right.
Are you going to go to the gym? Right. Probably not.
Not if I can't have a smoothie.
Right. So what you need to do is we need to focus on the antecedents. What happened, the way that you set up the situation to encourage the behavior that you want. So it seems like we're talking about diet and exercise a lot, but let's talk about homework. All right. So you tell your kid, if you do your homework, you can play your video games. Well, again, if they don't want to play video games, what motivation is there to do homework? Right. And so what you have to do is you have to set up the environment to encourage or to increase the likelihood that homework is going to happen.
Right.
Is your 8-year-old going to do homework if you send him to his room where all of his toys are, where all of his electronics are? Or is he going to do his homework on his own if you set him up in that situation? Probably not.
Right.
So to focus on to create the behavior that you want, you need to address the antecedents. So you say, bring your backpack out here while I'm cooking dinner. You sit at the kitchen table and you work on your homework.
I can't think of anything I feel so sorry for so many children because, on the one hand, their parents are haranguing and pressuring them to do their homework. But the house has a television set on, the dishes are being done, there's food being cooked, eaten, or sitting on the couch. The pets are running around, people are talking, there's all this stuff going on. That environment is not conducive to homework.
Right.
Okay? And I feel so sorry for so many children because they're getting punished for not doing homework. They're getting punished at school. They're getting punished by their parents. They're getting yelled at. They're getting all this stuff is happening to them. And yet we haven't set up circumstances that's conducive to do the homework.
Right.
What do you expect? They're not going to do it. So step two actually is that we have to set up the circumstances. If we talk about food, one of the things that we did with that weight loss program, it was actually a body changing program that we did with young teens a few years ago, is we cleaned out the cupboards.
Right.
Get all that stuff out of the house, because if it's there, you're going to eat it. I mean, you go into some houses and there are bowls of chocolate and bowls of M&Ms and canisters filled with cookies and
Right.
things. Well, you open the refrigerator and there's a lemon meringue pie in there.
Right.
Well, who's not going to eat it?
Right.
How do you have enough willpower to overcome a half-eaten lemon meringue pie?
Right.
Okay? And so set up your world and stack the deck in your favor.
Right.
I mean, get rid of all that stuff.
Yeah,
Okay?
in the elimination diet manual that we wrote, that's one of the things we said. Take a couple of weeks and set up the environment.
That's that first month,
because
right.
you're not going to be able to say, okay, I'm starting this tomorrow, because invariably you're going to have things in your cupboard, in your refrigerator, in your freezer that you shouldn't have.
That's right.
And if it's there, you're going to eat it. I'm always amazed at parents who complain about how their kids eat or how they dress.
They eat Oreos.
Yeah.
Where do the Oreos come from?
Or how they dress. Oh, I can't believe my kid dresses like that. I think that you bought their clothes.
That's right.
So you're complaining about things. You want to change some of these habits, some of these tendencies, but yet you're doing things that just encourage them to happen.
I have had parents say to me, not recently, but in the past, I've had parents say to me, well, I'm not going to punish the whole family just because she needs to lose weight. We should be able to eat these things, cookies and pies and cakes and everything. If it's in the house, she's going to find a way to eat it.
Absolutely.
If not, she's going to wait till you're asleep and she's going to eat it then.
Right.
Unless you lock the cabinets. But
So certainly those types of perspectives are selfish.
Right.
That is, and selfish is harsh, but it is tending to your own go system and assuming that your child or your spouse or your loved one is going to be able to sustain their stop system enough to overcome what they need to overcome. And it just doesn't work that way. We have to set up the environment to meet the expectations that we're setting for ourselves. People who want to exercise after work, the worst thing that you can do if you want to go to the gym to work out, the worst thing to do is go home first.
Right.
Because as soon as you get home, you're not going to, the likelihood of you leaving to go back to the gym is very, very small. Right. You bring your gym bag with you and you go to the gym straight from work. Right. That way, when you get home, because your habit, your routine is, I get home from work and I do this, and this. To say, I'm going to get home, I'm going to stop all of those routines that I've been doing for years and years and years, and I'm going to start this new one. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. So you have to set up the expectations and create mutually exclusive routines. I can't go home and get settled if I go to the gym first.
Right.
And so these two things can't happen at the same. You can't be home and at the gym at the same time. Right. So if you just go straight to the gym, then you're there, you get your stuff done, and then you go home.
Right.
So you have to. That's all about setting up the antecedents, setting up the environment to be successful.
That's right. And you have to think about what is your best time of day, what is your worst time of day. Some people are able to get up in the morning and go exercise before they do anything else. Other people can't stand to exercise in the morning. Some people want to exercise at 7 o'clock at night. So you have to know your daily biorhythms so that you take advantage of all that. If you know that your willpower goes down at night, then you might have to change your nightly routine.
Right.
Knowing that, I can go through the whole day and not eat very much. I'm not tempted to have desserts. I don't eat during the day. I don't eat any of that stuff during the day. But once I've eaten that evening meal, I want everything in the house, everything that's sweet.
Right.
I get this craving. Well, that's my weeks, and that's the time of the day when you have the least amount of inhibition.
That's when the frontal lobes are out of energy.
I've used up all that fuel. And so I have to restructure my evenings to set it up so that those things aren't available.
Right.
Get them out of the house.
Right.
I'm not going to get in the car, especially with the weather getting colder. I'm not going to get in the car and drive to the store to buy dessert.
Right.
But if it's sitting in the refrigerator,
Going to eat it.
I'm darn well going to eat it. Okay. So you set up the situation that that works in your favor.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And again, that's, if we go back to the first recommendation, writing it down, that helps set the stage for it.
That you have to organize this stuff.
You have to
work at it. Right.
It's not willy-nilly.
Right.
You have to organize it.
Right.
All right. So the last recommendation is to maybe a bit of a semantic issue, but you have to stop with the idea of stopping a behavior, stopping a habit.
Right.
As soon as you say, okay, that's it, I'm not going to eat chocolate anymore, almost immediately you begin craving chocolate.
Right.
It never fails, right? So you have to stop with the idea of saying, I'm going to stop this.
Yeah, I can hear food calling me even in a closed refrigerator. I can hear my name being called by that lemon meringue pie. It comes out. It's calling my name.
You've mentioned lemon meringue pie.
I love lemon meringue pie. If any listeners can make a good lemon meringue pie, I'll love you forever.
You mentioned key lime pie last night.
Yeah, well,
But lemon meringue is it. So stop saying stop. Stop saying no. Instead, and similar to what we were just talking about, let's replace it with something else. So you love chocolate. All right? Chocolate's okay.
Right.
But milk chocolate has a lot of sugar in it.
That's right.
It has a lot of dairy in it, and so it's not as healthy for you. Right. So say, instead of eating milk chocolate, I'm going to eat dark chocolate.
70%.
70% is ideal. Right. A lot of people have a hard time with 70%, but even
60.
if you started with 60 or 50% cocoa,
that's
better than milk chocolate. And what you're doing is you're replacing the behavior, and you're moving more in the direction that you want to be.
That's right.
If you're driven to do something, if for some reason you have to have chocolate. Okay, don't say, that's it, I'm not going to eat chocolate anymore, because that's not realistic. Right. Say, instead of having milk chocolate, I'm going to have dark chocolate.
There's a wonderful name for this. It's called bait and switch.
Yeah.
One guy calls it bait and switch. Like you go to a store, they give the ad for this car that cost $12,000, but when you get there, they switch you to the car that costs $15,000.
Right.
Okay, that's what you want to do with yourself. You want to bait and switch.
Yeah.
Don't worry about not eating chocolate, because not isn't going to get you it. The brain doesn't. How do we say that? The brain doesn't do not.
Right.
Don't set negative goals.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What you're not. Don't focus on what you're not going to do.
Right.
Okay. Because the brain doesn't set negative goals. The brain wants to be rewarded.
Right.
30% of your brain is after feel good. Okay.
Right.
And so all you have to do is switch from milk chocolate to dark chocolate.
Right.
In fact, you're doing your body some good if you eat dark chocolate. It's
Absolutely.
actually good for you.
Antioxidants, the flavonoids and everything that are in the dark chocolate are actually really good for you. Right. And here's the other part. If you don't like dark chocolate, making that switch is going to help wean you off of the chocolate.
Then you'll stop eking chocolate.
If you don't
like it, then don't eat it.
But that determination has to be there to say, and the other two parts is, okay, I'm not going to buy milk chocolate anymore.
Right. Okay. That's where it starts.
That's where it starts. Now, yes, that is a stop behavior, but we're not just stopping cold turkey, what we're doing is we're just modifying it. So instead of buying off the third shelf, the eye level shelf on the candy store aisle,
That's right.
just go up to the top shelf because that's where all the healthier
top and bottom.
Right.
Top and bottom has all the good, has the good
healthier stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right? All the eye level stuff is always the stuff that you probably want to avoid at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. So find a replacement behavior that gets you closer to your ultimate goal.
Right.
Don't say, if you smoke cigarettes, don't say, that's it, no more cigarettes. I'm not going to buy another pack. That doesn't work. I mean, the whole idea of nicotine patches and nicotine gum and everything is under the idea that you can't go cold turkey. Right. You have to wean yourself off of this. Mm-hmm. So, if you've been smoking for 30 years right. and you say, okay, that's it, I'm not going to buy another pack of cigarettes, you will. Probably. I mean, some people have that type of determination and they can stop. But most of us don't. Most of us need to wean ourselves off. So instead of saying, I smoke a pack a day now, let's cut it down to where that pack a day lasts for 2 days.
Right.
Then that pack can last for 3 or 4 days. And you just wean yourself down from it because you're not stopping the behavior.
That's right.
You're just replacing it. And so instead of taking 3 smoke breaks a day, you take 2 smoke breaks a day, and that other break that you usually take, replace it with something else. Go do something else then.
I'm not advocating this approach, but Ronald Reagan famously stopped smoking by eating jelly beans.
Right.
And whenever you see a picture of Ronald Reagan in the White House at his desk, you see a jar of jelly beans on the desk. And so he replaced his smoking habit with jelly beans. So don't set these negative goals. The brain learns by doing,
right,
not by not doing.
Right.
Okay. So you always want to look whether you're working on a plan for yourself or you're working on a plan for another person, like a child or a student. Rather than thinking, I have to get this kid to stop doing this, instead think in terms of what you can get the child to do instead.
Right.
Okay. Because if he's doing what you want, he's not going to be doing what you don't want.
Right.
Okay. So that's good. The other thing you need to do as you're going on your journey that we really haven't talked much about, and I love the way this James Claiborne, he wrote the Habit Change Workbook, and
bless you. Are you sneezing?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. So he wrote the Habit Change Workbook, and he said, be your own opposing counsel. Because what happens is, and I do this all the time, I'm so guilty of this.
My wife is usually my opposing counsel.
Well, I can imagine. No, I do this all the time. I chuckled when I read it because we give ourselves permission to cheat.
Right.
We say, well, I've done such
a cheat day.
Right. I get a day off, or I get this, or I get that. It's called permission giving, okay? You have to be your own opposing counsel, and you have to argue with yourself. When you say to yourself, well, look, I can have 4 M&Ms. I can have this. I can have that. No. You have to oppose yourself
right,
and stay on track. You're going to experience those feelings. It's absolutely normal that your body is going to keep moving you back to where you were. You have to keep fighting. You have to keep resisting. So be your own counsel. Be your own opposing counsel. Say, no, let me give you all the arguments against that.
Right. Yeah, because, and as we tie all these pieces together in the last few minutes that we have, the issue is that if you're really committed to this idea that you have, the idea of changing this habit, to give yourself the opportunities to cheat, sort of suggests that you're not really committed to it.
You're not ready yet.
Right.
That's right.
And again, we're not trying to be discouraging for anybody. What we're trying to say is you got to make sure you're ready.
Right.
Because I can't tell you how many people we've worked with, both therapeutically, but also coaching professionals and things like that, where they say that they want to make these adjustments. They want to do these things. But when the commitment's not there, I often feel like I'm doing all the work because I'm trying to get you motivated. I'm trying to get you going and everything. Right. But then you leave the office or we leave the meeting and the drive really isn't there.
Not there yet.
And that's okay.
Right.
We just have to acknowledge that. We just have to recognize that it's not there, and then do something about that. So we have to, again, that's why those first two steps are so critical to making this happen.
Right. And when we talk about making a plan, now we've talked about you take a month to think about how you're going to do it, write it all down, be very mindful, change your environment, be your own negative counsel, your own opposing counsel. There's one more thing. You're going to have setbacks.
Right.
Okay? I'm sorry, you're going to have setbacks.
Right.
You're not going to feel like going one day. That's part of your plan. You have to anticipate where will the setbacks occur.
Right.
If I'm trying to reduce my caloric intake, I know exactly what part of the day my setbacks are going to occur. So I have to have a plan for my setbacks.
Right.
Don't say, well, I'm filled with resolve. We're all filled with resolve on the first day.
Right.
But remember, you're going to be in day 25 at some point, and then it becomes, you're going to hit a plateau. That's what I did with mine. I hit a plateau, and you get discouraged.
Right.
How are you going to handle the plateaus? How are you going to handle the week that you didn't lose any weight? How are you going to handle the week that that you gained a few pounds because you were at a special dinner, or you went on a cruise or something? So anticipate your setbacks and how you're going to handle them as you enter this process. Don't wait until something happens. Plan on the setbacks. When will they occur? What's likely to happen? And what should I do when it happens?
Right.
Not just to prevent it, but how am I going to deal with it when it does happen?
Right, and a lot of that is part of the first step.
That's right.
You have to anticipate those things. When I was going through the elimination diet, I was getting rid of sugar.
Right.
That was the big thing for me. Sugar guy, and I've said that before. But I knew, because I was the only one in the family doing it, I knew that there would be sugar candy in the house.
Right.
And so what I had to do is I had to plan for that. And I had to say, this is how when I'm having this craving, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to say, I'm just not going to eat any sugar. I had to have a plan for it. And so, I can't tell you how many grapes and how many watermelons I ate during that time. And it's not that that's the healthiest of choices either, because there's sugar and there's it's healthier sugar than the refined sugars, but this isn't the time for that. But you have to have a plan. And when you have a plan, and then the important next step is implement that plan.
That's right.
Then you're going to find much more success.
That's right. If you go to the grocery store and you say, okay, I know I'm going to have these sugar attacks. Getting rid of sugar is hard because you've been eating it all of your life, whether you know it or not.
Right.
You've been eating sugar all your life. It's hard to get rid of. Buy dates, buy figs, buy watermelon, buy grapes, just load up on all the stuff that can be the replacements, the dark chocolate.
Right.
There are dozens of items that you can buy. Put those in the house, so when you have your craving, that's the kind of planning you need to do.
Exactly.
Don't wait until it strikes and then you're not prepared for it.
Right.
Prepare for those times. Prepare for those moments.
Right. So wrapping up, take a few weeks, a month to prepare. Identify what habits you want to change.
Don't be in a hurry.
And how you're going to change them. What is your long-term goal going to look like? Right. Don't focus on the consequence. Set up your environment to be successful.
Absolutely.
And then have a plan.
Right.
Know what you're going to do when the temptation is there, when the difficulties arise.
Right.
What are you going to do? How are you going to manage it? And how are you going to respond to those situations?
And what are you going to do instead?
Right. Because when we do that positive opposition, when we do something that is diametrically opposed to what we're trying to stop, that's good. Right. That's good stuff. Right.
If I have a mouthful of grapes, I can't have a mouthful of chocolate at the same time.
That's true.
Okay.
So, and we think that with those steps, that is one of the ways to overcome the obstacle of change when it relates to stopping old habits. So, a few quick reminders. Actually, just one big reminder. Next month, in February, we have a workshop planned. We'll get the date and the time to you and everything. But in February of 2016, we are going to do a workshop on dealing with test anxiety, managing test anxiety. February, of course, is the month right before we really get into the big standardized tests. So we hope everybody can make it, and everybody will be able to attend that workshop.
February is sort of the advent,
Yeah.
the Lent of high stakes testing.
That's right. So, but we'll announce all that information soon. So, until next time, I'm Dr. Berney.
And I'm Dr. Richard.
Have a great week, and forget to be afraid.
Good talking to you.